Ma'am, are you okay? The voice of a young janitor broke the silence. In front of her sits a 62-year-old woman on a bus stop bench, clutching an old suitcase and 9 crumpled dollars. She had walked miles in unbearable heat earlier, not knowing where she was going. The janitor took her home, fed her, and gave her a safe place to rest. But when the daughter who had abandoned her suddenly returned 2 years later, everything changed. What happened next left everyone completely stunned. Before we dive into this story, tell us what's the most memorable trip you've ever had. Share it in the comments below. Eleanor Grant had learned long ago that the worst pain doesn't announce itself with thunder. It comes quietly in ordinary moments, like a Tuesday morning drive with your only daughter. She was 62 years old, wearing the olive green jacket she'd bought for Melissa's wedding 7 years ago. It was the nicest thing she owned, though the left cuff was starting to fray. In the 6 months she'd lived in Melissa's spare bedroom, Eleanor had learned to make herself invisible. Even mending her own clothes felt like taking up too much space. "Mom, we need to go somewhere." Melissa had appeared in the doorway that morning, car keys already in hand. Her daughter was 35 but looked older. Stress had carved deep lines around her mouth. "Where are we going, sweetheart? Just get dressed. We don't have much time." The drive out of Flagstaff was silent. Eleanor watched familiar streets give way to desert highway and felt that old tightness in her chest. The one that had lived there since her divorce 23 years ago. Since all those years working double shifts while raising Melissa alone. Since giving everything and somehow it never being enough. When the pale yellow building appeared on the horizon, Eleanor's hands went cold. Sunset Valley Nursing Home, compassionate care for seniors. "Melissa, what is this?" Melissa pulled into the parking lot but kept the engine running. "It's a place where you'll be taken care of. Where they have staff, resources, things I can't provide. I don't need a nursing home. I'm only 62. You're expensive." The words came out flat. "The groceries, the utilities, the doctor co-pays. Steve and I are drowning, and you're the weight pulling us under." Eleanor felt each word like a physical blow. "I help where I can. I cook. I clean. It's not enough." Melissa got out and popped the trunk. Eleanor sat frozen. This couldn't be real. Any moment Melissa would apologize, say she didn't mean it. But her door opened. Melissa stood there with Eleanor's old suitcase at her feet. "Come on, Mom, let's not make this harder." Eleanor's legs barely held her. Through the nursing home windows she could see old people shuffling down hallways. This was where people went to wait for death. Melissa grabbed the suitcase and started toward the entrance. At the front door she stopped. "I can't walk you in. I have to get to work. Just go to the front desk. Tell them your name. You're not even coming inside." "I can't, Mom." Melissa pulled out crumpled bills and pressed them into Eleanor's hand. "Your Social Security comes next week. Until then this should help." Eleanor looked down. $12. "How can you do this?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "I'm your mother. And I'm tired. I'm so tired of feeling guilty." Melissa's voice rose. "You had your life. You made your choices marrying Dad, not saving money. Those were your choices. Now I have to make mine. And your choice is to throw me away. My choice is to save myself." Melissa turned toward the car. "Goodbye, Mom." She drove away without looking back. Eleanor stood watching the car disappear. She stood there for 10 minutes. 15. Surely Melissa would come back. Surely guilt would bring her back. But the road stayed empty. Behind her the automatic doors kept opening and closing. That institutional smell drifted out. Disinfectant. Sadness. The sound of a television too loud. Eleanor looked at the building. At the entrance where Melissa had left her like an unwanted package. She thought about walking through those doors. About accepting a room with scheduled meals and activities and waiting. Just waiting for it to be over. She was 62 years old. Not ancient. Just unwanted. And standing there with $12 and a daughter who'd driven away, something shifted inside Eleanor Grant. That crack in her heart finally widened enough for something else to push through. Anger. Cold. Clarifying. Eleanor picked up her suitcase and turned away from Sunset Valley Nursing Home. She walked down the sidewalk in the opposite direction. Away from those automatic doors. Away from the life Melissa had decided for her. She had no plan, but she had certainty she would not walk through those doors. Eleanor walked for 20 minutes before the heat forced her to stop. Her feet ached, sweat soaked through her jacket, but she'd put distance between herself and that nursing home, and that felt like victory. She found a bus stop bench under a metal shelter and collapsed onto it. Her mouth was dust dry. She needed water. Eleanor unzipped her suitcase looking for a water bottle. Her hands moved through folded clothes, her entire life in this bag. The blue cardigan her mother had knitted, photo albums, toiletries, no water, but her fingers brushed something else. An envelope. Old. Yellowed. Eleanor pulled it out and stared. Where had this come from? Then she saw the handwriting and her breath stopped. Her mother's precise script for Eleanor. When you need it most. Ruth Harrison Grant had been dead 15 years. How was this here? Eleanor peeled back the brittle tape with shaking hands. Inside was a photograph, her mother young and smiling, standing in front of their old New Mexico farmhouse. Flour dusted her apron. Beside her stood 7-year-old Eleanor, also covered in flour, grinning. She remembered that day. The warmth of her mother's kitchen. The feeling of being safe, loved, important. Beneath the photo was a small wooden cross and a notebook. Faded blue fabric cover. Written across it, Grant family recipes, for my daughter when she grows wise enough to use them. Eleanor opened it with trembling fingers. Page after page of her mother's handwriting. Recipes with notes that were part instruction, part wisdom. Prairie molasses bread. Let the dough rise twice. Good things take time. So do good people. Sunday morning cinnamon rolls. These take love and patience. Don't make them if you're angry. The dough will know. She turned pages carefully until she found one that stopped her breathing. Heaven's Whisper Cookies. The title was larger, underlined twice. Beneath it, these cookies carry the essence of joy. Eleanor girl. Made with cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, vanilla. But the real ingredient is love. Don't make them unless you mean it. These cookies can taste the difference. They'll only rise right if you bake them with your whole heart. At the bottom, one more note in different ink. I'm writing this on your 18th birthday. You're with that boy I don't trust. The one who'll hurt you. Maybe someday life will knock you down and you'll need to remember who you really are. These cookies will help. They're hope you can hold in your hands. Eleanor pressed the notebook against her chest and cried. Her mother had known. Had seen the mistakes coming. Had left these recipes like breadcrumbs. When the tears stopped, Eleanor felt emptier but lighter. She looked at the bus stop sign. Route 7 to Willow Ridge. Next bus in 18 minutes. She had $12. A suitcase. And her mother's recipes. Almost nothing. But more than Melissa had left her with. Eleanor wiped her eyes and put the notebook carefully back. She waited. She didn't know what she'd do in Willow Ridge. But she knew one thing. She would not accept being thrown away. Her mother had left recipes made with love. Recipes that had appeared exactly when Eleanor needed them most. Maybe that was enough. The bus arrived with a hydraulic hiss. Eleanor climbed aboard and counted out $2.50. The driver looked at her with kind eyes. You okay, ma'am? Eleanor started to lie. Then stopped. No. But I will be. He nodded. Take any seat. Eleanor moved to the back and sat by the window. As the bus pulled away, she looked back one last time at the direction of Sunset Valley. At the life she'd refused. Then she turned forward. Toward Willow Ridge. Toward whatever came next. The notebook sat on her lap, heavy with possibility. Eleanor whispered words that felt like prayer. Okay, Mama. I'm listening now. Show me what to do. The bus rumbled through the desert, carrying a 62-year-old woman with almost nothing toward a future she couldn't imagine. But for the first time in months, Eleanor Grant felt something other than despair. She felt the faintest flicker of hope. The Willow Ridge bus station was small and tired, the kind of place people passed through on their way somewhere better. Eleanor stepped off into heat that made her jacket feel like punishment. For a moment she just stood there, paralyzed by the question, what now? She counted the money left in her purse. $9.50 after the bus fare. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. But if she bought food, she'd have nothing left. The bus station beckoned. At least inside there'd be air conditioning. Bathrooms. Water. Eleanor grabbed her suitcase and went inside. It smelled like old coffee and floor cleaner. A handful of people sat waiting. A young mother with a toddler, an elderly man reading, a teenager with headphones on. Eleanor found an empty bench and sank onto it. Her feet throbbed. Exhaustion hit her like a wave. "Ma'am, you okay?" Eleanor looked up. A young woman stood there, late 20s, dark skin, kind eyes. She wore a gray uniform and held a mop. Her name tag read Rosa Thompson. "I'm fine," Eleanor said automatically. Rosa crouched down to eye level, and Eleanor noticed something the way Rosa looked at her. Really looked. Not through her or past her the way most people looked at old women, but at her. Seeing. "You don't look fine. You look like you've had a rough morning." Rosa studied Eleanor's face with concern. "When's the last time you drank water?" "This morning, I think." "That's too long in this heat. Wait here." Rosa disappeared through a door marked Employees Only, and returned with a paper cup. Eleanor drank desperately, not caring that some spilled. "Thank you. When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday evening." Something shifted in Rosa's expression. Recognition. Understanding. The look of someone who'd been hungry before and remembered what it felt like. "Come with me," Rosa said, making a decision. "Let's get you somewhere more comfortable." "I don't want to be trouble." "You're not." Rosa grabbed Eleanor's suitcase. "Come on." She led Eleanor through the Employees Only door to a small break room. Table, mismatched chairs, coffee maker. Rosa pulled out a chair. "Sit, I'll make coffee." As the coffee brewed, Rosa opened the mini fridge and pulled out a wrapped sandwich. "Turkey and Swiss. I made it for lunch, but I had a big breakfast. My neighbor makes pancakes every Tuesday and always brings me some. You take it." "I can't take your lunch." "Sure you can. I'm serious about those pancakes." Rosa unwrapped it and set it down. "Eat first, then we'll talk." The sandwich tasted like salvation. Eleanor tried to eat slowly, but hunger won. Rosa poured coffee and sat down across from her, waiting patiently until Eleanor finished every bite. "I'm Rosa Thompson," she said gently. "I clean this place. Been doing it for 3 years now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Mostly." She smiled a little. "Well, it pays rent and keeps the lights on. I make $11 an hour, and my rent's $650 a month, so you can do that math." Eleanor Grant. "Nice to meet you, Eleanor." Rosa wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. There was a pause, then she said carefully, "Now if you want to tell me what's going on, why you're here with just that suitcase, I'm happy to listen. But if you don't want to talk about it, that's okay too. No pressure." Eleanor opened her mouth, then closed it. Where would she even start? How could she explain to this kind stranger that her own daughter had thrown her away? The shame of it burned in her chest. Eleanor's voice came out barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can." Rosa's expression softened with understanding. "Hey, it's okay. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. I can see you've had a hard day. That's enough for me to know." The kindness in Rosa's voice, the complete lack of judgment or pressure, made something crack inside Eleanor. All the shame and pain and fear she'd been holding since this morning suddenly felt too heavy to carry alone. Her eyes filled with tears. Her hands started shaking around the coffee mug. Rosa saw it happening and moved quickly. She came around the table and wrapped her arms around Eleanor's shoulders. "It's okay," she said softly. "Whatever it is, it's okay. You're safe here." And that's when Eleanor broke. She sobbed. Deep wrenching sobs that shook her whole body, all the tears she'd been holding back since watching Melissa's car disappear, all the grief of being unwanted, all the terror of having nowhere to go. It all came pouring out. Rosa just held her, one hand rubbing slow circles on her back, murmuring, "Let it out. It's okay. I've got you." When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups, Eleanor pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You don't even know me and I don't apologize," Rosa said firmly. She grabbed a box of tissues from the counter and handed them to Eleanor. "You needed to cry. That's nothing to be sorry for." Eleanor wiped her eyes, her hands still trembling, and then haltingly, the story came out. About Melissa driving her to the nursing home. about the $12 pressed into her hand, about being left at the entrance like an unwanted package, about standing there for 2 hours waiting for her daughter to come back, about refusing to go inside, about the bus ride here with no plan and nowhere to go. Rosa listened without interrupting, her face going through a range of emotions, shock, anger, sadness, but she didn't speak until Eleanor finished. Then she said simply, her voice fierce, "Your daughter's a damn fool." Eleanor let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. "I mean it, anyone who'd leave their mama like that doesn't deserve one." Rosa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You got family? Friends you can call?" "No. There's no one else." Eleanor's voice broke. "There's no one." Rosa nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer, but it still hurt to hear. "Okay. Then you're staying with me tonight. I got a small apartment about 3 blocks from here. It's not much, just a studio I rent for $650 a month, which is basically half my paycheck. But the couch pulls out and it's better than the street. I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask, I'm offering." Rosa's smile was warm and genuine despite the tears in her eyes. "Look, I know what it's like to have nothing. I grew up in foster care, 7 different homes before I aged out at 18, with $200 and a garbage bag full of clothes. That was 10 years ago. I've been on my own ever since, working whatever jobs I could get. Waitressing, retail, cleaning. Whatever paid the bills." She paused, looking down at her coffee. "There was this woman at a shelter where I stayed that first month. Mrs. Patterson. She gave me a coat and $40 for bus fare. She told me I mattered, that I deserved kindness. That helped me more than she ever knew." Rosa looked up at Eleanor. "So yeah, I help when I can. Because someone helped me when I had nothing. And because nobody should be alone when they're hurting like you're hurting right now." Eleanor felt fresh tears spill over. "But you barely know me. I know enough. I know you're somebody's mama who got treated bad. I know you're sitting here with less than $10 trying to figure out what comes next. I know you're scared but you're still trying." Rosa reached across and squeezed Eleanor's hand. "That's all I need to know." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both wiping their eyes. Eleanor felt wrung out but also somehow lighter, like sharing the burden had made it slightly easier to carry. She remembered the notebook in her suitcase. Maybe that was something. Maybe that mattered. "Rosa, can I ask you something? Anything? Do you know how to bake?" Rosa's face lit up with unexpected joy, the sadness lifting. "I love baking. My last foster grandmother, the good one, Mrs. Chen. She used to let me help in her kitchen before I aged out. She taught me chocolate chip cookies, banana bread, all these amazing things." Her expression dimmed slightly. "I haven't done much lately because my kitchen is basically a hot plate and a toaster oven. No real oven. And ingredients cost money I usually need for rent. But yeah, I know my way around a mixing bowl." "Why?" Eleanor pulled out the blue notebook and set it on the table with trembling hands. "This was my mother's. Her recipes. I found it in my suitcase this morning. I hadn't seen it in years, maybe never saw it at all. I don't know how it got there." Rosa picked it up carefully and opened it slowly, her eyes widening. "Oh Eleanor, this is beautiful. Look at this handwriting." She turned pages carefully. "These are real old-fashioned recipes. Heaven's Whisper cookies." "What's that?" "That's the special one. The one my mother said carried joy." Eleanor's voice was soft. "I only watched her make them a few times when I was little. Then life got busy and I never learned. And then Mama died and I thought the recipes were lost forever. Until this morning." Rosa read the recipe carefully. When she looked up, there was something almost reverent in her expression. "Eleanor, this station has a kitchen. It's small, barely used anymore. They used to have a real cafe here but now they just sell pre-packaged stuff. But it's got an oven and everything we need." She leaned forward, excited now. "What if we made these? Tomorrow morning early before Frank comes in and before my shift gets busy. Just to see if we can. I don't know if I remember how. It's been 55 years, that's what the recipe's for. And Eleanor, some things you don't remember with your head. You remember with your hands. Rosa smiled. Your mama's hands made these. Your hands carry that memory even if you don't know it. Eleanor looked at this young woman she'd met less than 2 hours ago. This stranger who'd seen her crying and broken and hadn't turned away, who'd offered shelter and food and now hope. Why are you doing this? Eleanor asked, her voice still thick with emotion. Rosa was quiet for a moment, really thinking. Because I've been where you are. That feeling of being completely alone, of thinking you don't matter, of wondering if the world would even notice if you disappeared. Her voice was soft. Not quite hope yet, but possibility. Okay, she whispered. Let's try. Tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. I'll use my key to get us in early before Frank arrives at 8. He won't know as long as we're done by the time he shows up. Won't you get in trouble? Not if we're careful. Rosa shrugged. That evening, Eleanor followed Rosa to her apartment, a converted house divided into 4 units. Rosa's was on the first floor, exactly what she'd promised. Small, the main room served as both living room and bedroom, with a Murphy bed that folded down from the wall. The kitchen was barely a kitchen. A narrow galley with a mini fridge, a 2-burner hot plate, a microwave and a toaster oven on the counter. No real oven, no real stove. See what I mean about the kitchen? Rosa said. I can make scrambled eggs and toast, but anything more complicated is pretty much impossible. That's why the station kitchen is perfect. It's got a real oven, real counter space, everything we need. But despite its size, the apartment was clean, organized. There were books on a small shelf, a few plants on the windowsill, photos tacked to the wall. Rosa insisted Eleanor take a shower and made scrambled eggs on the hot plate for dinner. They ate standing up because there wasn't room for a table. She put on music from her phone and hummed along while she cooked, filling the small space with normalcy, with kindness. Eleanor lay on the couch in the dark, listening to Rosa's breathing even out as she fell asleep in the Murphy bed. She thought about how strange life was. This morning she'd been abandoned at a nursing home, too ashamed to even speak about it. Tonight she was sleeping in a tiny studio apartment with a woman who'd held her while she cried, who'd listened without judgment, who'd somehow made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she still had value. It made no sense, but somehow, lying there in the dark of Rosa's cramped apartment, Eleanor felt something she hadn't in a long time. Safe. And seen. And like maybe tomorrow could be different from today. And for the first time in months, Eleanor Grant fell asleep without nightmares. The alarm went off at 5:30. Eleanor woke disoriented, forgetting where she was for a moment. Then she heard Rosa moving quietly around the small apartment and smelled cheap instant coffee brewing. Hope. She'd gone to sleep with the faintest flicker of hope. Morning, Rosa whispered. Careful not to be too loud in the small space. Coffee's almost ready. We should leave by 5:45, that gives us time to bake before Frank shows up at 8. Eleanor dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, the only clothes she had that weren't worn out, and splashed water on her face in Rosa's tiny bathroom. Her hands were shaking. What if she couldn't do this? What if the cookies were terrible? What if Frank caught them? Rosa handed her a chipped mug of instant coffee and a granola bar. Eat, you'll need your strength. They walked to the station through the pre-dawn darkness. The town was completely quiet, peaceful in that way places are before the world wakes up. Rosa's keys jangled softly as she unlocked the back entrance. She led Eleanor down the dim hallway to the kitchen door and unlocked it, flipped on the lights. The fluorescent bulbs buzzed and flickered before settling into harsh brightness. Eleanor looked around at the small commercial kitchen. One oven, old but functional. One stainless steel counter, industrial sink, shelves stacked with supplies for the cafe counter out front. It's not much, Rosa said looking around, but it's 1,000 times better than my hot plate, and see. Real oven, real counter space. Rosa walked over and gently took the notebook from Eleanor's shaking hands, setting it on the counter. Then she took both of Eleanor's hands in hers. Eleanor took a shaky breath and nodded. Okay. Let's do this. Rosa smiled and picked up the notebook. Tell me what we need. Flour, sugar, butter, eggs, and cinnamon nutmeg. clove, vanilla extract. Rosa started pulling ingredients from the shelves and the industrial refrigerator. Got all of it. The cafe uses them for the frozen pastries. Nobody's gonna notice if we borrow a little bit. What's first? Eleanor opened to the Heaven's Whisper page with trembling fingers. Sift the flour 3 times. 3 times. Why 3? I don't know, that's just what Mama said. Each sifting adds air, adds lightness, adds possibility. Rosa found a sifter and handed it to Eleanor. Then 3 times it is. Eleanor poured flour into the sifter. Her hands were still shaking, but as she began the repetitive motion, sift, pour, something happened. Her breathing slowed. Her hands steadied. There was something meditative about it. Something that felt like muscle memory even though she couldn't remember ever doing this before. They worked through the recipe step by step. Rosa melted butter while Eleanor measured sugar. Together they creamed them until pale and fluffy, added eggs one at a time, folded in flour gently. Then came the spices, the essence of joy. Eleanor measured out cinnamon, nutmeg, clove and vanilla extract with careful precision. As she stirred them together in a small bowl, the smell hit her like a physical force. Sweet and spicy and warm and somehow achingly familiar. She was 7 years old again, standing on a stool in her mother's kitchen, watching those same hands measure those same spices. Eleanor. Rosa's voice was soft. You okay? Eleanor realized tears were streaming down her face. But she was smiling. I remember this smell. I remember being happy. Rosa squeezed her shoulder. Then your mama's here with us, helping us make them right. The timer went off. Rosa pulled out the trays carefully and set them on the counter. The cookies were perfect. Golden edges, soft centers, still puffing slightly as they cooled. We did it, Rosa whispered. Eleanor, we actually did it. Eleanor stared at the cookies. Her mother's cookies, made by her own hands after 55 years. She felt something break open in her chest. Not pain. Something else. Something like joy. Rosa picked up one that had cooled slightly and broke it in half. Steam rose from the center. She handed half to Eleanor. Together, Rosa said. They bit into the cookies at the same time. The flavor was extraordinary. The spices perfectly balanced. The texture melting on Eleanor's tongue. And there was something else. Something indefinable. Something that made Eleanor's eyes sting and her throat tighten. They arranged the cookies on paper plates and carried them to the small cafe counter near the waiting area. The early morning crowd was starting to trickle in, commuters waiting for buses, travelers passing through. Rosa made a simple sign on a piece of cardboard. Heaven's Whisper cookies, fresh baked this morning. $2 each. Eleanor stood behind the counter, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was it. The moment that would tell her if this crazy idea had any merit at all. A businessman in a rumpled suit walked by, glanced at the cookies, kept walking without slowing down. An elderly woman with a rolling suitcase stopped, looked at the display, then at Eleanor with skepticism written all over her face. Homemade, here at a bus station. Yes, ma'am. Eleanor said quietly, her voice barely steady. From my mother's recipe, made them fresh this morning. The woman picked up a cookie, examined it closely like she was looking for defects, sniffed it suspiciously, then put it back down. No thank you. She walked away without another word. Eleanor's stomach dropped, her hands went cold. A young man in work clothes approached next. How much? $2 each. Eleanor's voice came out hopeful. He pulled out his wallet, looked at the cookies again, then seemed to think better of it. Maybe later. He left without buying anything. Rosa tried to stay upbeat, calling out to people passing by. Fresh baked cookies, made this morning from a family recipe. But people barely glanced at them. An hour passed, people walked by. Some glanced at the cookies with mild curiosity. Most didn't even look. No one bought. Not one person. Eleanor felt hope draining out of her with each person who passed. Each person who looked away. Each person who acted like she and her cookies were invisible. By 9 o'clock they'd sold exactly 0 cookies. Not a single one. Eleanor's eyes were burning with unshed tears. Maybe Melissa had been right. Maybe she was worthless. Maybe. Then a heavy-set man in a bus station uniform approached with heavy footsteps, name tag reading Frank Martinez, manager. He looked at their display with immediate disapproval, his face darkening. Rosa, what the hell is this? We're selling cookies, Frank, Rosa said nervously, her voice going higher. Just trying something new. We used the kitchen during off hours before you came in. We didn't interfere with any station operations. Frank picked up a cookie, sniffed it with a scowl and set it down without tasting. His face was dark with anger. You got permits for this? Rosa's face went pale. Permits? You can't just sell food anywhere you want, Rosa. There are health department regulations, business licenses, food handler certifications. He crossed his arms, his voice rising with each word. What you're doing here is completely illegal. Do you know what happens if someone from the county walks in here and sees this? They shut down the whole damn station. They fine me. They fine the company. Frank, please, I don't want to hear it. Clean this up, right now. His voice went cold and hard. And Rosa, you used the kitchen without authorization. You used company ingredients. You sold unauthorized products on company property. That's 3 violations. If I catch you doing anything like this again, anything, you're fired. Do you understand me? Rosa's shoulders slumped, her voice small. Yes, Frank, I understand. Good. Clean it up, now. Before someone sees this mess. Frank walked away, shaking his head and muttering under his breath. Rosa and Eleanor stared at each other in stunned silence. Around them the bus station continued its rhythm. People came and went, completely indifferent to what had just happened. Nobody cared about the cookies cooling on paper plates. Nobody cared about the 2 women whose hope had just been crushed. Nobody cared at all. They packed up the cookies in silence and carried everything back to the break room. Eleanor sat down heavily on one of the plastic chairs, feeling every one of her 62 years pressing down on her. I'm sorry, Rosa said quietly, her voice thick with disappointment and fear. I didn't know about the permits. I should have checked. I should have researched before we did this. Now I've put my job at risk and wasted ingredients, and it's not your fault, Eleanor said, but her voice was hollow. She looked at the 47 unsold cookies sitting in boxes, hours of work. Her mother's recipe. The first thing she'd accomplished in months. The first time she'd felt capable of anything. And nobody wanted them. Maybe this was stupid, Eleanor said, her voice breaking. Maybe I'm just a desperate old woman grasping at straws, too old to start something new, too old to matter. Melissa was right, I am a burden. I can't do anything useful. Don't say that, Rosa said, but there were tears in her eyes too. Why not? It's true. Eleanor felt tears finally spilling over. I'm 62 with no money, no home, no future. I thought these cookies could fix everything. I thought making them would somehow make me valuable again, prove that I could still contribute something. I was a fool. Rosa knelt in front of her, taking Eleanor's hands. You're not a fool, those cookies are amazing. The world just hasn't figured it out yet. The afternoon stretched long. Eleanor dozed fitfully. When she woke it was nearly 5. Rosa would be home soon. Eleanor couldn't just sit here drowning. She left a note and went for a walk. Willow Ridge was small enough to walk end to end. Eleanor wandered, looking at shops she couldn't afford, restaurants where families ate together. Normal lives. She ended up at a small plaza with benches and a dry fountain. She sat watching people pass, a mother with children arguing over ice cream, a couple holding hands, an old man feeding pigeons. Excuse me, a voice made Eleanor look up. A woman stood there, or what looked like a woman beneath layers of dirty mismatched clothes. Her face was weathered and grimy. Her hair hung in matted clumps. She carried plastic bags holding her entire life. Homeless. The couple nearby crossed to the other side. The mother grabbed her children and hurried past, creating distance. Ma'am, I'm so sorry to bother you. The woman's voice was rough, barely used. I'm just so hungry. Do you have anything? Eleanor looked at her, really looked, and saw herself. Not literally, but close enough. This woman was what Eleanor could become. Someone invisible, someone people avoided, someone whose humanity had been erased. Wait here, Eleanor said. She walked back to Rosa's apartment quickly, grabbed boxes of cookies. If nobody else wanted them, at least they could feed someone truly hungry. The woman was still there when Eleanor returned, tucked into the corner like she was trying to disappear. Here, Eleanor opened a box. Please, take some. The woman's eyes widened. Her trembling hands reached out slowly like she expected Eleanor to snatch the box away. When her fingers closed around 3 cookies, she made a sound like a sob. Thank you, you don't know what this means. She didn't eat right away. She looked at each cookie like it was precious. Then finally she took a small bite, and stopped. Her entire body went still, her eyes closed. When she opened them again, tears streamed down her dirty face. Oh my God, she breathed. This tastes like my grandmother's kitchen when I was little, like Sunday mornings before everything went wrong, like home. Eleanor felt her own eyes sting. They're my mother's recipe. The woman ate slowly, savoring. When she finished, she looked at Eleanor with startling intensity. These aren't just cookies, there's something real in them, something people need. She leaned forward. Ma'am, don't stop making these. Promise me. Nobody wants them. We tried to sell them. Nobody bought one. The woman laughed harshly. People are fools. They don't recognize good things. But they'll wake up. I promise. She grabbed Eleanor's hand with surprising strength. Keep making these. Something this good can't stay hidden forever. She reached into a bag and pulled out a smooth stone with a hole through its center. My grandmother gave me this. Said it was lucky. It hasn't been lucky for me. But maybe it's meant for you, for your journey. I can't take, you already have. The woman smiled, and despite the dirt and hardship, it was beautiful. Thank you, for the cookies, for seeing me, for treating me like a person. She stood gathering her bags. You're going to be okay, Eleanor. I can feel it. How do you know my name? The woman just smiled wider and walked away. Eleanor stared at the stone in her hand. Warm, smooth, the hole perfectly round. Rosa found her there 20 minutes later. There you are. Are you okay? Eleanor told her what happened, about the woman's reaction, about the stone, about the strange intensity of it all. She was right, Eleanor said. Those cookies are special. They taste like more than ingredients. They taste like memory, like love, like something real. Rosa sat beside her. So what do we do? I don't know, but I'm not giving up. Not yet. Eleanor looked at the stone. That woman reminded me these cookies aren't just about selling. They're about connecting, meaning something. We need a different approach, Rosa said thoughtfully. Not at the station, somewhere people might actually pay attention. They sat watching the sunset, paint the sky orange and pink. Tomorrow, Rosa said, we'll try something different, but Eleanor, we're not giving up. Agreed. Eleanor closed her hand around the stone. Agreed. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She turned the stone over and over, thought about the homeless woman, how she'd known Eleanor's name, the clarity in her eyes after eating the cookie. Maybe this wasn't about one failed morning. Maybe this was about persistence, about believing even when the world didn't believe back yet. Eleanor woke to knocking on Rosa's door. It was 7 in the morning. Rosa, still in pajamas, looked confused as she answered. I'm looking for Eleanor Grant. Is she here? Eleanor stood and walked to the door. A woman stood there, 58, maybe 60. Tailored slacks, silk blouse, silver hair perfectly styled. She had the kind of presence that came from money and success. But her eyes, those eyes were familiar. You, Eleanor breathed. The woman smiled. May I come in? Rosa looked at Eleanor questioningly. Eleanor nodded slowly. The woman entered and closed the door. My name is Margaret Hill. Yesterday, in the park, I was someone else. Someone who needed to see the truth. The homeless woman, Eleanor said flatly. That was you. Yes. Rosa's face went hard. You pretended to be homeless. You lied to us. I did, and I apologize. Margaret set a leather portfolio on the table. But I needed to know something you can only see when people think you're nothing, whether you were real. Know what? Eleanor felt anger building. Whether your hearts were genuine. Margaret pulled out documents, business cards, articles, photographs. I'm a food industry consultant. I've spent 25 years working with artists and food producers. I've been looking for something authentic to invest in. Yesterday, I found it. Eleanor stared. You want to invest in cookies we can't even sell. You're going about it wrong. But that's not the point. Margaret pulled out a photograph. Old, faded. 2 young women in front of a farmhouse. The point is this. Eleanor's hands shook. It was the same photo from her mother's envelope. Where did you get that? This is my grandmother. Margaret pointed. And this is her best friend, Ruth Harrison. Your mother. Eleanor felt the room tilt. You knew my mother. No, she died before I was born. But my grandmother talked about her constantly. They grew up together. Ruth had these recipes, family recipes passed down through generations. My grandmother said they were magical, that they carried something essential. Margaret's voice softened. They lost touch when Ruth's family moved west. My grandmother regretted it until she died. She made me promise that if I ever found Ruth's recipes I'd help preserve them. Rosa sat down slowly. What do you want from us? To honor that friendship. To build something both women would be proud of. Margaret pulled out a thick document. I want to help you create a real business. Proper licensing, professional kitchen, brand development, distribution, everything you need. We tried. No one wanted them, Eleanor said. Because people didn't understand what they were getting. That's where I come in. I have contacts, resources, experience. I'm willing to invest both money and expertise. Why? Eleanor asked. Because I promised my grandmother. Because those cookies are extraordinary. The emotion I felt was real, Eleanor. And because Margaret leaned forward. I've worked with hundreds of food entrepreneurs. Most chase trends. But you two are chasing something real. That's rare. That's worth protecting. Rosa studied the documents, articles from food magazines, photos with famous chefs, business cards from major companies. What would this partnership look like? I'd handle legal requirements, connect you with commercial kitchen space, help with packaging, branding, distribution. Margaret pulled out a contract outline. In exchange I'd take 20%, you two retain control and majority ownership. I'd be advisor and investor, nothing more. 20% of nothing is still nothing, Eleanor said quietly. It won't be nothing if we do this right. Margaret met Eleanor's eyes. I know you're scared, but your mother left you those recipes for a reason. Not just to feed you, to save you, to show you that you still have value. Eleanor thought about yesterday. The homeless woman, Margaret, crying over the cookie. Her tears had been real. Her advice sound. I need time to think. Of course. Margaret pulled out a business card. But Eleanor, I meant what I said yesterday. You have a gift. Don't let fear stop you from sharing it. After Margaret left, Eleanor and Rosa sat in silence. She's legit, Rosa said. All those documents. She's the real deal. I know. And she's offering real help. Money, expertise, connections. Eleanor picked up the photograph. Her mother and Margaret's grandmother, young and laughing, arms around each other. Best friends who'd lost each other. Maybe we're not supposed to do this alone, Eleanor said softly. Maybe Mama was trying to tell me not to make the same mistake, not to push away help when it's offered. Rosa smiled. Then let's take the help. Build something real. Eleanor looked at the photo, at her mother's young face so full of hope. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. They called Margaret that afternoon. I was hoping you'd call, Margaret answered. What did you decide? We want to try. We want to build something my mother would be proud of. Then let's make it happen. Margaret moved like a force of nature. Within 2 days of Eleanor and Rosa agreeing to the partnership, she'd arranged meetings with a business lawyer, an accountant, and the county health department. This is too much, Eleanor said, staring at documents spread across a coffee shop table. I don't understand half these words. Margaret sat beside her patiently. That's why I'm here. Let me walk you through each one. She picked up the first form. This is your LLC registration. It protects your personal assets if something goes wrong. This is your food handler certification. Proves you know food safety. You'll both need to take a 4-hour online course and pass a test. I've already paid for it. They went through each document slowly. Business licenses, health permits, liability insurance, tax registrations. Each form required information Eleanor barely had. I don't have most of this, Eleanor said, frustrated. How can I start a business when I don't even have a permanent address? We'll use Rosa's address for now. Once you're making money you'll get your own place. Margaret made notes. The point is we're building the foundation properly. That's how you avoid getting shut down like what happened at the bus station. Rosa had taken the day off work, using one of her precious 3 vacation days to be part of these meetings. She took notes, asking questions when things didn't make sense. How much is all of this going to cost? Rosa asked. The permits, the licenses, the insurance. Margaret consulted her notes. Roughly $3,000 to get everything set up properly. Eleanor felt sick. We don't have $3,000. Between the two of us we have maybe $300 total. I know. That's why I'm covering initial setup costs. Margaret held up a hand before Eleanor could protest. It's an investment, not charity. Part of my 20% stake means I provide the startup capital. You can't build without money, and right now you don't have money. I do. That's why partnerships work. But what if we fail? Rosa asked quietly. Then we fail together and I lose my investment. That's the risk I'm taking. Margaret looked between them. But I don't think we're going to fail. I've been in this industry 25 years. I know what succeeds. You two have something real. That's rare. The lawyer Patricia Chen explained the partnership agreement in plain language. Eleanor and Rosa are equal 50-50 partners. Margaret holds 20%. All major decisions require unanimous agreement. No one person can make unilateral choices. They signed papers, filed documents. Margaret tracked every expense, explaining they'd need accurate records for taxes, and for knowing when the business became profitable. You'll pay me back eventually, Margaret said, but only after the business is consistently profitable, and you're both drawing reasonable salaries. No pressure before then. They needed a proper place to produce cookies. We can't use Rosa's apartment, Margaret said. Her kitchen won't pass health inspection. We need a licensed commercial kitchen. Margaret had already researched options. There's a space available on the edge of town, 1,500 square feet, 2 industrial ovens, multiple prep stations, everything you need. She showed photos on her laptop. The rent is $800 a month. Eleanor nearly fainted. We can't afford that. Not yet, but you will. Margaret pulled out her checkbook. I'm covering the first 3 months, $2,400. By then you should be generating enough revenue to cover it yourselves. That's a lot of money to risk, Rosa said, awed. It's not a risk if I believe in you. But Eleanor had more concerns. Even if we get this kitchen, we'll need ingredients, equipment, supplies. I've budgeted another $2,000 for that, Margaret said, showing her spreadsheet, plus a small emergency fund. Rosa did math in her head. So you're investing over $7,000 before we've made a single sale. That's how startups work. You invest before you make money. They signed the lease. Standing in the empty commercial kitchen, Eleanor felt overwhelmed. Margaret hired a branding designer, David Ortiz, who specialized in food products. I love the story, he said. This is about legacy, heritage, connection. He developed a design that made Eleanor cry. Cream boxes with navy lettering, a farmhouse illustration. That's Mama's farmhouse, Eleanor said. Below it, Grant Heritage Sweets. Made from family recipes since 1947. 1947 was the year your mother was born, Margaret explained. It roots the brand in history. They ordered packaging, business cards, aprons, every expense tracked carefully. The commercial kitchen required setup. They spent 3 days organizing, learning the industrial equipment, testing recipes at scale. Making 50 cookies at once was different from 20. The biggest moment came 3 weeks into preparation. Rosa came to Eleanor's new efficiency apartment, a tiny studio Margaret had helped Eleanor rent for $450 a month. I need to talk to you, Rosa said, sitting down. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. It's just. Rosa took a breath. I need to quit my job at the bus station. We can't build this business if I'm spending 40 hours a week cleaning toilets. But Eleanor, that job is the only income I have. If I quit and this fails, I have nothing. No job, no income, no way to pay rent. Eleanor felt guilt wash over her. Rosa, you can't risk your job for this. What if I'm wrong? What if nobody wants these cookies? Stop. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what I've decided. Rosa's voice was steady but her hands shook. I'm betting everything on us, on these cookies. I'm terrified. I haven't been unemployed since I was 8. That steady paycheck meant I could keep the lights on, pay rent, eat. Without it,
I'm one mistake away from being homeless. Then don't quit, Eleanor said urgently. Please, I can't be responsible for you losing everything. Rosa smiled. You're not responsible. This is my choice. I believe in this. I believe in you. But we can't do it halfway. We can't build a real business on nights and weekends while I'm exhausted from scrubbing floors all day. But what if we fail? Then we fail together, and I'll find another cleaning job. Rosa took Eleanor's hand. Mom, you took a chance walking away from that nursing home when you had nothing. Now it's my turn to take a chance. Eleanor's throat tightened at the word mom. Are you sure? I'm sure. Then do it. Quit. We'll make this work. Rosa gave her 2 weeks' notice. Frank wasn't surprised. Good luck, he said without warmth. You're gonna need it. Their first real production day was chaos. They'd planned 300 cookies, managed 160. The industrial mixer was too powerful. The dough was over-mixed and tough. Eleanor was near tears. We're wasting ingredients. Rosa quit her job for this, and we're failing. Margaret stayed calm. This is completely normal. First production runs always have problems. Tomorrow you adjust. That's how you build expertise. Next day 250 cookies. Day after 300 perfect ones. By the second week they had rhythm. 500 cookies in 4 hours. They had systems for everything. Now they needed to sell them. Margaret leveraged her industry contacts. She called cafe owners, brought samples, made professional pitches emphasizing the story, the abandoned mother, the family recipes, the authenticity. The first 3 said no. The fourth, the Morning Bird Cafe, said maybe. Let me try 2 dozen, said Sarah, the owner. If they sell, I'll order more. Eleanor and Rosa delivered them at 6 a.m., watching Sarah arrange them in her display case. At 11:30, Sarah called. They're gone, all 24, sold out in 4.5 hours. People loved them. Can you do 10 dozen tomorrow? Yes, Rosa said, we can handle that.
Those sold out by noon. Word spread fast. Margaret used Sarah's success as leverage. Look, the Morning Bird is selling out daily. Your customers want these too. One by one accounts opened. A boutique grocery, a wine bar, a bookstore cafe, a yoga studio. Grant Heritage Suites went from 300 cookies weekly to 3,000. They hired employees. First 1, then 2, then 5. The kitchen ran 2 shifts. Revenue grew. First month of real sales $4,000. After expenses, Eleanor and Rosa each took home $800. More money than Eleanor had made in a month in 5 years. She cried depositing the check. Rosa cried with her. We did it, Rosa whispered. We actually did it. They expanded the product line. Prairie Caramel Bars. Homestead Pecan Fudge. Both from the Notebook. Customers loved them all. 6 months after starting, they opened a retail shop on Main Street. A former dry cleaner. Renovated beautifully. Cream walls. Glass cases. Photos of Eleanor's mother on the walls. The grand opening drew a line around the block. They sold out in 4 hours. That night, exhausted and exhilarated, Eleanor, Rosa and Margaret sat in the empty shop. We did it, Rosa said. Eleanor looked around at what they'd built. 8 months ago abandoned with $12. Today co-owner of a thriving business. Mama would be proud, Eleanor whispered. She would. Margaret agreed. And so would my grandmother. Rosa leaned her head on Eleanor's shoulder. I'm glad I gave you that sandwich. Eleanor laughed. I'm glad you did too, sweetheart. 3 women who'd found each other through unlikely circumstances and built something that mattered. Not just a business but family. And they were just getting started. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning 9 months after Eleanor had been abandoned at the nursing home. Rosa opened it during their morning meeting and read it twice before looking up with wide eyes. Eleanor, you need to see this. The sender was a producer from Good Morning America. They'd seen an article in the Phoenix Tribune about Grant Heritage Suites and Eleanor's story. They wanted to feature her on the show. National television, Rosa breathed. Millions of people. Eleanor felt panic grip her chest. I can't go on television. I'll mess up. I'll freeze. You'll be amazing, Margaret said firmly. This is an incredible opportunity. Do you know how many women feel exactly like you did? Like they're worthless, like their lives are over. You could show them it's not true. Eleanor wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed no. But she thought about the letters they'd been receiving. Handwritten notes from customers saying the cookies reminded them of their grandmothers. Women Eleanor's age saying they'd been inspired. Maybe this mattered more than her fear. Okay, Eleanor whispered, I'll do it. 2 weeks later, Eleanor and Rosa flew to New York. Eleanor had never been on a plane before, had never been east of New Mexico. The city was overwhelming. Too many people, too much noise, too much everything. The Good Morning America studio was chaos. Lights, cameras, people rushing everywhere. A producer named Jennifer walked Eleanor through what would happen. Robin Roberts will interview you. She's wonderful, very warm, just answer her questions naturally. Be yourself. But Eleanor did worry, right up until she sat on that bright yellow couch across from Robin Roberts. Then something shifted. Robin's smile was genuine, her presence calming. Eleanor, thank you for being here, Robin said. I tried your Heaven's Whisper cookies. They're extraordinary. Thank you, but it's your story I really want to talk about. Tell our viewers what happened. Start from the beginning. And Eleanor did. She told it all. The nursing home, the $12. Rosa's kindness, the recipe notebook appearing like a miracle. Margaret's partnership, the struggle to build something from nothing. She didn't mention Melissa by name, but she didn't hide what had happened either. My daughter decided I was a burden she couldn't carry. Eleanor said simply. She left me at a nursing home and drove away. And for a long time I believed her. I believed I was worthless. She looked at the camera. But I learned something. The people who should love us sometimes can't. And that's not our fault. That's their limitation, not ours. Robin leaned forward. What would you say to other women watching who feel like their best years are behind them? Eleanor thought about the woman she'd been 9 months ago, sitting on that bench ready to give up. I'd say you're wrong. Your best years aren't behind you unless you decide they are. I was 62 years old with nothing but $12 when I started over. And now, she smiled. Now I have a business, a daughter, a purpose, a life that matters. Her voice strengthened. It's never too late. You're never too old. The only question is whether you're brave enough to try. The interview lasted 8 minutes. When it aired 3 days later, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Grant Heritage Suites' website crashed within an hour. Their email flooded with hundreds of messages. Orders poured in from across the country. People wanting the cookies, wanting to support Eleanor's story, wanting to believe second chances were real. Within a week they'd received over 1,500 orders. Margaret helped them navigate the sudden growth. This is critical. You can either scale up or stay regional, but you need to decide now. Eleanor and Rosa talked for hours. Scaling meant more risk, more employees, bigger facilities, but it also meant reaching more people. Let's go bigger, Rosa said. We didn't come this far to play small. They found a larger facility, 5,000 square feet with industrial equipment. The rent was $3,000 monthly, still terrifying, but they signed the lease. They hired 20 employees, implemented quality control systems, started shipping nationwide. Whole Foods reached out. They wanted to test Grant Heritage Suites in 50 stores. If sales met projections, they'd expand nationwide. Margaret handled negotiations protecting Eleanor and Rosa's interests. The final contract was favorable. 50 stores immediately, expansion based on performance. They signed. Within 3 months, Grant Heritage Suites was in 150 Whole Foods stores from California to New York. Revenue hit 6 figures monthly. Eleanor and Rosa each made more money than they'd ever imagined. Eleanor bought a small house, 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a garden. Nothing extravagant, but hers. She furnished it slowly with pieces she chose, hung her mother's photo in the living room, kept the original notebook in a special case. She was 63 now. 1 year since the nursing home, her life was unrecognizable. But Eleanor wanted to do more than sell cookies. She wanted to help others. I want to start a foundation, Eleanor told Margaret one evening, to help women like me, women who think they're too old or too broken to start over. Margaret smiled. That's a beautiful idea, and very feasible. They established the Eleanor Grant Foundation for Women's Second Chances, funded by Eleanor and Rosa's personal money, with a percentage of company profits going to it quarterly. The foundation provided grants up to $5,000 for women over 50 starting small businesses. Along with money came mentorship, legal help, business planning. The first application cycle drew 400 applicants. Eleanor read every single one. They awarded 23 grants that first year. A 68-year-old woman starting a dog walking service. A 72-year-old former teacher opening a tutoring center. A 55-year-old artist launching a pottery business. Each recipient sent photos, updates, thank you notes that Eleanor kept in a special file. One letter particularly moved her. Dear Mrs. Grant, I saw you on Good Morning America and thought, if she can do it at 62, maybe I can too. I'm 60 and had been living in my car for 3 months after losing my job. Your grant helped me start a mobile pet grooming business. I'm making enough to rent an apartment now, but more than the money, you gave me hope. You proved women like us still matter. Thank you. Eleanor kept that letter on her desk, read it when things got hard. Churches started inviting her to speak, community centers, women's conferences. Eleanor said yes to as many as she could. She wasn't a natural speaker, got nervous, sometimes stumbled, but she was authentic. I'm not special, she'd tell audiences. I'm just someone who refused to stay down. You can do that too. Whatever knocked you down, get back up. Find your recipe book. Find your Rosa. Find your thing and build it. Forbes magazine featured Eleanor in their second Acts series 1 year after the Good Morning America appearance. The article called her living proof that reinvention knows no age limit. The photographer came to their facility, took pictures of Eleanor and Rosa working side by side, of employees packaging cookies in cream-colored boxes with the farmhouse illustration. The Forbes article brought another wave of attention, more orders, more media requests, more women writing to say Eleanor had inspired them. Grant Heritage Suites opened 2 more retail locations, one in Phoenix, one in Tucson. The brand was becoming recognizable. People asked about franchising. Margaret advised caution. Franchising dilutes quality if you're not careful. Let's perfect what we have first. Eleanor agreed. This wasn't about getting as big as possible. It was about sustainability, quality, honor. She was 64 now, 2 years since the nursing home, and sometimes she had to pinch herself. She had wealth, not extravagant, but comfortable. She had respect, recognition, purpose, but most importantly she had family. Rosa, her legal daughter, Margaret who'd become like a sister, the employees who'd become extended family. One evening, Eleanor sat in her garden watching the sunset. The lucky stone Margaret had given her sat on a small table. She turned it over in her hands, thinking about how far she'd come, from abandoned to celebrated, from worthless to valuable, from alone to surrounded by love. Her phone rang. Rosa, hey Mom, just calling to say I love you. Eleanor smiled. Those words never got old. I love you too, sweetheart. See you tomorrow at the Phoenix shop. Wouldn't miss it. Eleanor hung up and sat in the gathering darkness, grateful for the struggles that had shaped her, for the people who'd helped her, for the second chance she'd fought for. Life was good, really truly good. And tomorrow she'd wake up and keep building, keep growing, keep proving that it's never too late, because that was what 64 looked like when you refused to give up. The Phoenix retail shop had been open 3 weeks when Melissa walked through the door. Eleanor was behind the counter helping a regular customer choose between lemon lavender cookies and the classic Heaven's Whisper. She was laughing at something the customer said when she felt it, that awareness of being watched by someone whose gaze carried weight. She looked up and froze. Melissa stood just inside the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun. For a moment Eleanor couldn't breathe, couldn't move, just stared at the daughter who'd abandoned her 2 years ago. Melissa looked different, thinner with sharp angles. Her designer jeans and leather jacket were expensive but hung on her frame like they'd been bought in better times. Her hair was professionally colored, her makeup perfect, but there was something in her eyes, not quite the desperation Eleanor expected, something else, something harder to read. Rosa appeared from the back room carrying fresh cookies. She saw Eleanor's face, followed her gaze and went absolutely still. The tray trembled in her hands. Is everything okay? The customer asked, noticing the tension. Eleanor forced herself to finish the transaction, to smile and hand over the bag with shaking hands. Thank you. Come back soon. The customer left. The shop was suddenly quiet except for soft music and the hum of the display case. Melissa took a step forward. Mom, this place is incredible. I've been reading about you, following everything you've built. The words sounded rehearsed,
but not quite in the way Eleanor expected. There was something performative about Melissa's tone, but underneath it, nervousness. "What are you doing here, Melissa?" Eleanor's voice was steady. "I came because..." Melissa glanced around the shop, taking in the professional displays, the steady stream of customers visible through the window, the cream-colored boxes with the farmhouse logo. "Because I've been thinking about what you've accomplished, about how you did all this." She paused, and something flickered across her face. "And Mom, I realize now you need help. Real help. Professional management." Rosa set down the tray with a sharp sound. "Excuse me." Melissa barely glanced at her. "This is a real business now. It needs proper structure, financial planning, marketing strategy, things that require business expertise." She pulled a folder from her designer bag with practiced confidence. "I've been working in retail management for years. I know how to scale operations. I could help you take this to the next level, help you maximize profits, expand distribution, maybe even franchise." "Help?" Rosa's voice cut like a knife. "Help? You want to help now? I'm talking to my mother." "No." Rosa stepped forward, and there was something fierce in her eyes that made Melissa take a step back. "You don't get to walk in here and act like you're doing her a favor. You don't get to pretend you care about helping. Who do you think you are to..." Melissa started, her voice rising with familiar irritation. "I'm the person who found her." Rosa's voice rose to match. "I'm the person who was there when she had nothing. When she was sitting in a bus station with a suitcase and $9, trying to figure out how to survive another day. Where were you?" Melissa's face flushed, her mouth opening with a ready defense. "I was dealing with my own problems." "Your own problems?" Rosa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me tell you about her problems. She sat on a bench outside that nursing home for 2 hours waiting for you to come back. 2 hours, in the desert heat, hoping you'd change your mind, hoping her own daughter wouldn't actually abandon her like trash." Melissa's prepared speech died on her lips. 2 hours. The words came out quieter than she'd intended. Something in her face shifted, confusion maybe. Like this detail didn't fit with the story she'd been telling herself. "That's not fair," she started, but the words sounded weaker now. "Fair?" Rosa's hands clenched into fists. "You want to talk about fair? When she came to my bus station she hadn't eaten in over 24 hours. She was so dehydrated she could barely speak. She had $12 that you gave her like she was a beggar on the street." Melissa opened her mouth, closed it, her hand tightened on the folder she was holding. The nursing home would have fed her, they would have taken care of. She never went inside. Rosa's voice cracked. She refused to go inside. She walked away instead. "Do you understand what that means?" She was so devastated by what you did, that she chose to walk into the desert with nothing rather than accept the place you dumped her at. Melissa went very still. She didn't go inside. "No, she didn't." Rosa's voice shook with rage and grief. "She stood there watching you drive away, waiting for you to come back, and when you didn't, she just started walking. In the heat, with a suitcase and $12. She didn't even know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't go through those doors." The folder slipped from Melissa's hands, papers scattering across the floor. She didn't bend to pick them up. She just stared at Rosa, her face going pale beneath her makeup. "But the nursing home, I thought they'd process her, get her settled. I thought she'd be safe." The words came out uncertain, like Melissa was hearing herself say them, and realizing for the first time how hollow they sounded. "You thought?" Rosa stepped closer. "You didn't think. You didn't stay to make sure. You didn't call to check. You just left her there and drove away and told yourself a story that made you feel better about what you'd done." Melissa's breathing had gone shallow. Her eyes darted to Eleanor, then away, like she couldn't bear to look. "I was going to call. I was going to check on her once she got settled." "When?" Rosa demanded. "When were you going to call?" "It's been 2 years, Melissa. 2 years of silence, of not knowing if she was alive or dead, of not caring enough to find out." "I cared." The protest came out automatic, defensive, but then Melissa stopped. Her mouth hung open for a moment. She looked at Eleanor again, really looked this time, and something crumbled in her expression. "I told myself I cared. I told myself it was too painful to think about. that it was better for both of us if I just moved on. Let her move on. Better for you, you mean? Rosa said. Melissa didn't argue, she just stood there staring at Eleanor with dawning horror in her eyes. The silence stretched out. Other customers in the shop had stopped pretending not to listen. Do you know what she did that first night? Rosa's voice was quieter now but no less intense. She apologized to me. She apologized for being a burden, for taking up space on my couch. This woman who'd worked 3 jobs to put you through college, who'd given you everything, and she thought she was the burden. Melissa's hand came up to her mouth. No, I never said she was. But the words died because they both knew that wasn't true. Melissa had said exactly that, had called Eleanor a burden, a weight, too expensive to carry. Do you know how many times she cried herself to sleep those first weeks? Rosa continued. How many times she woke up from nightmares about being left on that highway? How many times she looked at her phone hoping you'd call, just to make sure she was still alive? Melissa's eyes were filling with tears now, mascara starting to run. I didn't know she was. I thought she'd be angry, not sad, not hurt like that. Her voice was barely audible. I thought she'd be fine. Eventually, I thought she'd adjust to being abandoned. Rosa's voice broke. Adjust to her own daughter telling her she was worthless, that she was too much, that her existence was drowning you. Melissa flinched with each question like they were physical blows. Her hands were shaking now. The folder she'd brought, full of business proposals, strategies, ways to take control, lay forgotten on the floor, pages scattered and ignored. She was 62 years old, Rosa said, her voice thick with emotion, sleeping on my couch, wondering if she'd ever matter to anyone again, wondering if you'd been right, that she was worthless, used up, too old to deserve love or kindness, or even basic human decency. Stop. Melissa's voice cracked. Please stop. But Rosa didn't stop. We made those first cookies with ingredients I bought with my own money because she didn't have any. We tried to sell them at the bus station and nobody bought them. Not one. Do you know what that did to her? She sat in my apartment that day saying she'd been stupid to think she could do anything. Stupid to think she had value. That maybe you'd been right about her all along. Melissa made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Her legs seemed to give out and she grabbed the counter for support. We made $28 the first time we actually sold any cookies. Rosa continued relentlessly. $28. And you know what she did? She cried, because it was the first time in months she felt like she had value, like she could contribute something, like she wasn't just waste taking up space. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the music seemed to have faded away. Melissa stood there, one hand still gripping the counter, the other pressed against her mouth. Tears were streaming down her face now, unchecked, making tracks through her carefully applied makeup. She looked at Eleanor, really truly looked at her for what felt like the first time. Saw the lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago. The gray in her hair that Eleanor no longer bothered to dye. The quiet dignity in how she stood, not broken but forever changed. Mom, Melissa whispered, then stopped, because what could she possibly say? Eleanor stood very still, watching her daughter process what Rosa had told her, watching the reality of what she'd done sink in. It was like watching someone wake up from a dream, or maybe from a deliberate act of self-deception. Melissa's mouth opened and closed several times. Her gaze dropped to the scattered papers on the floor, the business proposals, the management strategies, the ways she'd planned to insert herself into Eleanor's success. The presumption of it all seemed to hit her like a wave. I thought, Melissa's voice was so quiet people had to strain to hear. I thought I was coming here to help. I thought, I convinced myself that's what this was. That I had skills you needed, that I could make myself useful and that would make things right somehow. She looked up at Eleanor with eyes that were finally genuinely seeing. But I was just trying to make myself feel better. Trying to be part of something good so I could tell myself I wasn't a bad person. Wasn't the person who did what I did. She bent down slowly and started gathering the scattered papers with shaking hands. Not because they mattered anymore, but because she seemed to need something to do. Something to look at other than Eleanor's face. I told myself so many stories, Melissa continued, her voice breaking. I told myself you'd be fine, that you were tough, that you'd land on your feet. I told myself the nursing home would take good care of you, that it was better this way, less stressful for you, less stressful for me. I told myself I'd done you a favor, given you a place where you'd have activities and friends and 3 meals a day. She laughed, but it was a horrible sound. I told myself you'd be grateful. Eventually, once you adjusted, she looked up at Eleanor, papers clutched in her hands. But you never went inside, you just walked away, into the desert, with $12, and I never knew, I never checked, I just went on with my life, and convinced myself everything was fine. The silence stretched out. Melissa seemed to be waiting for Eleanor to say something, to yell at her, to tell her she was right, she was a monster. But Eleanor said nothing, just watched her daughter with an expression that was impossible to read. When did you eat next? Melissa asked suddenly, looking at Rosa. After that sandwich you gave her. When did she eat again? Rosa seemed surprised by the question. I made her dinner that night, scrambled eggs, and before my sandwich. When had she eaten before that? She said. She said it had been over 24 hours. Melissa's face crumpled. Oh God, Mom, you were hungry. You were hungry and alone and scared, and I just left you there. She pressed her hand to her mouth again, her whole body shaking. I left you there and I went home and I made myself lunch, and I watched TV and I told Steve it was done, that you were taken care of, that we didn't have to worry about you anymore. She sank down onto the floor, still holding the scattered papers, tears dripping onto the business proposals that now seemed obscene in their presumption. I can't, Melissa's voice was barely audible. I can't believe I did that to you. I can't believe I'm the kind of person who could do that, who could leave their mother on the side of the road and then just go on living like everything was fine. Eleanor moved then, finally. She walked around the counter slowly. Rosa tensed, protective, but Eleanor shook her head slightly. She stood in front of Melissa, looking down at her daughter sitting on the floor surrounded by papers that meant nothing. Get up, Melissa. Melissa looked up, her face blotchy and streaked with mascara. She struggled to her feet, still clutching the papers like they were a life raft. I don't know what to say, Melissa whispered. I don't know how to make this right. Is there anything I can do to make this right? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she said finally. I honestly don't know if you can make this right.
Melissa nodded, tears streaming faster. I don't deserve for you to forgive me. I know that. I'm not asking for that. She stopped, swallowed hard. I just need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, not the story I told myself about it, the actual truth of what I did. And I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Are you? Eleanor's voice was quiet but not unkind. Are you sorry for what you did? Or are you sorry that you have to face what you did? The question hung in the air. Melissa opened her mouth, an automatic defense rising, then stopped. She stood there, really thinking about the question, really examining herself in a way she maybe never had before. I don't know, she admitted finally. I think I'm both. I think I'm sorry I hurt you, but I also think I'm sorry that I'm not the person I thought I was, that I'm capable of something this cruel, and I don't know which feeling is bigger right now. I don't know if that makes me an even worse person. The honesty of it seemed to surprise even Melissa. She looked at her mother with something like wonder. I think I need help, Mom. Professional help. I think there's something wrong with me that I could do what I did, and then just compartmentalize it. Forget about it. Build a wall around it so I didn't have to feel it. Eleanor nodded slowly. Yes, I think you do need help. I'm going to get it. Melissa wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara further. I'm going to figure out why I did this, why I'm capable of this, and I'm going to try to become someone better, someone who isn't capable of abandoning people when they're inconvenient. She looked down at the papers in her hands, the business proposals, the ways she'd planned to insert herself into Eleanor's success. Slowly, deliberately, she walked to the trash can behind the counter and dropped them in. I didn't come here to help you, she said quietly. I came here to help myself, to make myself feel useful, to be part of something good so I could tell myself I wasn't bad. But that's not help. That's just more selfishness. She turned back to Eleanor. I'm not going to ask for anything from you. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, not a place in your life or your business. I'm just going to try to be better. And maybe someday I'll be someone who deserves to have a mother like you. But I'm not that person now. I don't know if I'll ever be that person. But I'm going to try. Eleanor felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, that was too big too soon. But recognition maybe. Recognition that Melissa was actually hearing what Rosa had said. Actually letting it sink in rather than deflecting or defending or running away. That's all I can ask, Eleanor said quietly. Melissa nodded. She looked at Rosa. Thank you, for saying those things, for making me hear them. I think I needed someone to be angry enough to tell me the truth. I've been living in a story I told myself and nobody challenged it. Nobody made me look at what I actually did. Rosa's expression was still guarded but she nodded once. Melissa walked toward the door then paused. Mom, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but are you happy? Are you okay? Eleanor looked at her daughter, the one who'd abandoned her, the one who was maybe possibly beginning to understand what she'd done. Yes, Eleanor said, I'm happy, I'm okay, I built a good life, without you. Melissa flinched but nodded. Good. That's good. She opened the door. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm going to spend a long time being sorry, but I'm going to try to be more than sorry. I'm going to try to be better. She walked out. The door chimed softly behind her. Eleanor stood there, her legs suddenly weak. Rosa was beside her immediately. Are you okay? I don't know. Eleanor looked at the trash can where Melissa's business proposal sat crumpled. Do you think she meant it? I don't know, Rosa said honestly. But Mom, even if she did, that doesn't mean you owe her anything. That doesn't mean you have to let her back in. I know. Eleanor sat down on the stool behind the counter. But maybe people can change. Maybe people can actually see themselves and want to be better. Maybe, Rosa said carefully, but you don't have to be the one to find out. You don't have to watch that process. You don't have to put yourself through more pain just to see if she's serious. Eleanor nodded. She knew Rosa was right. She didn't owe Melissa anything. But somewhere in her heart, despite everything, there was a small fragile hope that maybe her daughter would actually do the work, would actually try to be better. Not for Eleanor's sake, not to win back a relationship, but because she'd finally seen the truth of who she'd been, and decided she wanted to be someone else. Time would tell, and Eleanor didn't have to be there to witness it if she didn't want to. That at least was her choice to make. 3 weeks after Melissa's confrontation, a legal letter arrived. Rosa opened it during their morning meeting and read aloud. Melissa Grant versus Eleanor Grant and Rosa Thompson Grant. Petition to void adult adoption, claiming undue influence and elder abuse. Eleanor felt her stomach drop. She's actually suing. Patricia Chen reviewed the lawsuit that afternoon. She made notes, occasionally shaking her head, then set the papers down. This is weak, very weak. She's claiming you were coerced, but the adoption happened 18 months ago. You were evaluated by a court psychologist. You had independent legal counsel. There's no evidence of coercion, so she'll lose, Rosa asked. Almost certainly, but she can drag it out, make it expensive and stressful. Patricia looked at Eleanor. The question is whether you want to fight or settle. Some people pay a nuisance settlement. Pay her. Eleanor felt anger surge. Give her money to reward bad behavior. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying it's an option. No. Eleanor's voice was firm. I won't be bullied. If she wants a fight, we'll fight. Patricia nodded with approval. Then I'll need to include details about how Melissa abandoned you. It's relevant to showing why you chose Rosa. The circumstances will become public record. Eleanor thought about her story becoming official documents, but she'd already told it on television. It wasn't a secret. Do what you need to do. Patricia filed a comprehensive response 2 weeks later. Witness statements from Rosa about finding Eleanor at the bus station. Documentation of Melissa's abandonment. Bus station footage, phone records, showing no contact for over a year. Evidence of Eleanor's sound mental state, psychological evaluations, testimony from business partners, financial records. Most damaging was the timeline. Melissa had abandoned Eleanor, hadn't contacted her for over a year, only reappeared after Eleanor became successful. The implication was clear. This wasn't about family. This was about money. Melissa's lawyer withdrew 5 days after receiving Patricia's response. No explanation, just gone. Melissa filed new paperwork representing herself. Her arguments were emotional, rambling, full of accusations but short on evidence. The hearing was scheduled 6 weeks later. Eleanor, dressed in a navy suit Margaret had helped her pick, professional, respectable, someone who clearly knew her own mind. The courtroom was small. Judge Sandra Morrison entered, a woman in her mid-60s with sharp eyes. "This is a petition to void an adult adoption," Judge Morrison said. "Miss Grant, Melissa Grant, you're claiming your mother was unduly influenced. Is that correct?" Melissa stood. "Yes, Your Honor, my mother is elderly. She was vulnerable. This woman took advantage of her." "I see." Judge Morrison looked at the file. "According to these documents, you left your mother at Sunset Valley Nursing Home with $12. Is that accurate?" Melissa's face flushed. It's more complicated. I was under financial stress." "You abandoned your 62-year-old mother. Yes or no?" "Yes, but did you go inside with her?" "No, but did you come back?" Silence. "Did you contact your mother during the following 14 months?" "No, but I didn't know where she was." "You made no effort to find her. No calls to hospitals or shelters. No missing persons report." Judge Morrison's voice was cold. "You simply moved on. Is that accurate?" Melissa's hands clenched. "I was going through a divorce. I'm sure you were. But that doesn't change the facts." Judge Morrison turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Grant, please stand. Do you understand the nature of the adoption?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Did anyone force or pressure you?" "No, Your Honor. I chose freely. Rosa saved my life. She's been more of a daughter than," Eleanor's voice caught, "than my biological daughter ever was." "I see." Judge Morrison made notes. "Miss Grant, Melissa Grant, you didn't attend the adoption hearing. You didn't contest it then. Why now?" "I didn't know about it. Your mother was under no obligation to inform you. You'd abandoned her. You'd severed the relationship." Judge Morrison's voice was icy. "It seems you're only interested in your mother's welfare now that she's financially successful. Would that be fair?" "That's not. I love my mother. If you loved her you wouldn't have left her with $12. The judge closed the file. "I've reviewed all evidence. I've read psychological evaluations. I've read witness statements. I see no evidence of undue influence. What I see is a woman who made a thoughtful choice about who she wanted in her life. Your Honor, please, the petition is denied. The adoption stands." Judge Morrison looked at Melissa with clear disapproval. "Furthermore, I'm ordering you to pay the legal fees incurred by the respondents. You may arrange a payment plan. I can't afford." "You should have thought of that before filing a baseless lawsuit." Judge Morrison stood. "This hearing is concluded. Mrs. Grant, Miss Thompson Grant, congratulations on your family." She left. The gavel's crack echoing. Melissa sat stunned. She looked at Eleanor one last time, rage and regret and loss mixed together. Then she gathered her papers and left without a word. Eleanor sagged against Rosa. "It's over. It's really over," Rosa whispered. Patricia smiled. "Congratulations. Though I'm sorry it came to this." Margaret put her arm around them both. "Let's celebrate. Lunch is on me." They went to a nice restaurant, ordered too much food and toasted with sparkling water. "To families we choose," Rosa said. "To women who refuse to be victims," Margaret added. "To justice," Patricia finished. Eleanor raised her glass. "To second chances, and to knowing when to let go." Later that week Patricia received a call from Melissa's landlord. Melissa had been evicted for non-payment. She'd listed Patricia as a reference. "What did you tell them?" Eleanor asked. "The truth, that I represent you, not her, and that I can't provide references for someone I don't know." Patricia paused. "I also heard word has spread through Flagstaff about what she did. Small town gossip. People don't want to associate with her." Eleanor felt no satisfaction, just sadness. "Do you want to help her?" Rosa asked gently. Eleanor thought about it. "No, she made her choices. I can forgive her, but I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." "That's wise," Margaret said. "Sometimes the kindest thing is letting people experience consequences. Maybe she'll learn, maybe she won't, but that's not your responsibility." Eleanor nodded. She'd let Melissa go, really truly let her go, not with anger,
just with acceptance that some relationships aren't meant to be fixed. Meanwhile, Grant Heritage Suites continued thriving. They opened a fourth location in Tucson. Whole Foods expanded to 200 stores nationwide. Revenue hit 7 figures annually. Rosa excelled as co-owner. She took business courses online, made smart decisions that protected and grew what they'd built. "You're a natural," Margaret told her. "You should be proud." "I learned from the best," Rosa said, smiling at Eleanor and Margaret. The Eleanor Grant Foundation helped 93 women in its second year. Each success story celebrated, each setback a learning opportunity. One evening, Eleanor and Rosa sat in Eleanor's garden. She'd spent the year cultivating herbs, vegetables, flowers. "Do you ever think about Melissa?" Rosa asked. "Sometimes. I wonder if she's okay, but I don't carry it anymore. The worry, the guilt, the feeling I owe her something." Eleanor looked at Rosa. "I gave her everything for 35 years. She threw it away. That's on her." Rosa squeezed Eleanor's hand. "You're my mom, in every way that matters." "I know, and you're my daughter, the one I was always meant to have." They sat watching the sunset. Two women who'd found each other when they both had nothing, who'd built something beautiful together, who'd become family not through blood, but through choice. And that was the best kind of family there was. 2 years and 3 months after being abandoned, Eleanor decided it was time to go back. Not to Sunset Valley, she had no desire to see that place, but to the spot where everything had changed, where Melissa had left her with $12 and no future. She asked Rosa to come with her. They drove out from Willow Ridge on a Saturday morning. The desert was beautiful in early light, the red rocks glowing, the sky impossibly blue. Rosa drove Eleanor's car, a sensible sedan, nothing fancy but reliable and paid for. "Are you sure about this?" Rosa asked. "We don't have to if it's too hard." "I need to," Eleanor said. "I need to see it again, to mark how far I've come." Rosa slowed as they approached. Eleanor recognized it immediately. The same highway, the same landscape, the same bus stop bench. Rosa pulled over exactly where Melissa had parked, turned off the engine. They sat in silence. "Ready?" Rosa asked. "Yes." They got out. The morning air was cool. Eleanor walked to the bench and sat down slowly. Rosa sat beside her. "This is where I found Mama's recipes," Eleanor said. "Right here. I was so scared, so alone. I thought my life was over, but it wasn't. No, it was just beginning." Eleanor looked at Rosa. "If Melissa hadn't left me here, I never would have found you. Never would have started the business. Never would have become this person." "Do you forgive her?" Rosa asked. Eleanor thought about it. "I do. Not because what she did was okay, but because holding on to anger was too heavy. I've built something beautiful, and I won't let her poison it." She smiled. "Besides, she gave me the greatest gift without meaning to. She freed me. You were never nothing. I felt like nothing. That's what mattered." Eleanor stood. "Come on, I want to do something." She walked to the exact spot where she'd stood with her suitcase, where her old life had ended. Rosa joined her, and together they looked toward Willow Ridge, toward the life that had been waiting. "I want to leave something here," Eleanor said. She pulled out a small envelope she'd prepared. Inside was a note, asterisk. "Here, a woman was abandoned by her daughter. Here, a woman found her mother's recipes. Here, a woman chose to rise instead of fall. Here, everything changed. To anyone who finds this, you are not too old, you are not too broken, you are not worthless. Your story isn't over unless you say it is. Start where you are, use what you have, become who you're meant to be." Eleanor Grant, age 64 asterisk. She placed the envelope under stones, anchoring it. It probably wouldn't last long. But that wasn't the point. The point was marking the moment. Rosa took a photo of Eleanor standing there, in the same spot where she'd been abandoned. But everything about her was different now. Her posture, her expression, her presence. "This is going on the wall at the Willow Ridge shop," Rosa said, showing Eleanor the photo. Eleanor looked at it, at herself standing strong in the place where she'd once been broken. "Okay, let's use it." They stood a few more minutes. Then Rosa said, "Ready to go home?" "Yes, I'm ready." They drove back to Willow Ridge, to the town that had become home. When they reached Eleanor's house, Margaret was waiting with breakfast, pastries, coffee, fresh fruit. How did it go? Margaret asked. Good, Eleanor said. Really good. I needed to see that place one more time. To put it in perspective, they ate on Eleanor's patio, talking about the week ahead, a new product launch, possible Colorado expansion, an interview request. You know what we should do, Rosa said suddenly. Write a book, your story, Mom. People need to hear it. I'm not a writer, so we hire someone who can help tell it properly. Rosa's eyes were bright. Think about how many women could find hope in your story. Margaret nodded. It's not a bad idea. I have contacts in publishing. Eleanor thought about it, sharing her story completely. It was scary, vulnerable. But maybe Rosa was right. Okay, Eleanor said. Let's try. Within 3 months they had a book deal. A publisher specializing in inspirational memoirs. A ghostwriter who interviewed Eleanor for hours. The book was titled Heaven's Whisper, a recipe for starting over. It included Eleanor's story and selected recipes from her mother's notebook. Memoir and cookbook blended. It published a year later to positive reviews. Made several bestseller lists. Sold well because Eleanor's journey resonated with people who'd felt discarded, invisible, too old. She did a small book tour, spoke at bookstores and libraries, signed copies for women who cried and thanked her for giving them hope. At one signing, an elderly woman approached. She must have been 75. She handed Eleanor a copy to sign. I bought this last week, read it in one sitting, and yesterday I enrolled in community college. After 50 years of saying I was too old, I finally realized I'm not. Eleanor felt tears sting. That's wonderful. Thank you for showing me it's possible. After the woman left, Eleanor looked at Rosa and Margaret. This is why we did it. That woman, and thousands more. Margaret said, You're changing lives, Eleanor. Eleanor thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, convinced she had no value, no purpose, no future, and now she was here, signing books, running a business, helping women find their own second chances. I'm just doing what Mama taught me, Eleanor said softly, baking with love, sharing what I have, refusing to give up. That evening Eleanor went home to her small house with the garden she'd cultivated. She made tea and sat on her porch watching stars appear. Her phone buzzed. Rosa, love you, Mom. Proud of you. Always. Eleanor smiled and texted back, love you too, sweetheart. See you tomorrow. She sat in the darkness, thinking about the journey, about being abandoned, about finding recipes in a suitcase, about Rosa's kindness and Margaret's belief and her own stubborn refusal to accept that 62 was too old, about becoming someone who mattered, who had value, who made a difference. Thank you, Mom, Eleanor whispered, for the recipes, for the hope, for showing me I was stronger than I knew. The desert wind whispered through her garden, carrying the scent of herbs and flowers, carrying promises of tomorrow. Eleanor Grant was 64 years old. She'd started over with nothing, and built something beautiful. She'd lost one family and found another. She'd been broken and put herself back together stronger. And she was just getting started. Because life didn't end at 60 or 70 or 80. It ended when you stopped trying. When you accepted your story was finished. Eleanor's story wasn't finished. It was still being written. Every day, every choice, every cookie, baked with love. Every woman helped. Every person who heard her story, and decided to try again. This was what 64 looked like when you refused to give up. This was what hope looked like when you chose to believe in it. This was what love looked like when you built it with your own hands and shared it with the world. Eleanor finished her tea, went inside, and slept peacefully, deeply, without nightmares, because she was home, really truly home, not just in a house, but in a life she'd created, a life that mattered, a life worth living. And tomorrow she'd wake up and keep building, keep growing, keep proving that it's never too late to become who you were always meant to be. At 64, Eleanor Grant hadn't just started over, she'd finally started living.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.